Legislative Resolution number 57 by Senator Perkins, honoring Elombe Brath upon the occasion of his designation for special recognition on Saturday, May 11, 2013, by a number of prominent community groups for a lifetime of loyalty, distinguished service as a community, national, and international civil and human rights leader. Whereas the great community is only as great as those persons and organizations that provide exemplary service, whether through participation in volunteer programs, through unique personal achievement in their profession or other endeavors, or simply through a lifetime of good citizenship. Elombe Brath is one such individual. This legislative body is justly proud to honor Elombe Brath upon the occasion of his designation for special recognition on Saturday, May 11, 2013, by a number of prominent community groups for a lifetime of loyalty and distinguished service as a renowned activist locally, nationally, and internationally. And whereas the prominent community groups recognizing this remarkable man include Schaumburg Plaza Residents Council, Sojourner Truth Club, Patrice Lumumba Coalition, December 12th Coalition, and the 1845-51 Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Tennis Association. And whereas born in Brooklyn, New York on September 30th, 1936, to parents who had immigrated to the United States from Barbados, the Caribbean island geographically close to the African continent, his early training of a political character was hearing his mother speak of her first cousin, Lionel Wickham, who was the editor of the renowned Herald newspaper. And whereas in his autobiography, Ready for Revolution, the acclaimed revolutionary Stokely Carmichael referred to Elombe Brath as the Dean of Harlem Nationalists. And while such a tribute is admirable, Brath's black nationalism, his Pan-African thought, as many will attest, extends well beyond Harlem with a special resonance among freedom fighters around the globe.
So hello to everybody out there. Thank you for tuning in. You are tuning in to an interview hosted by yours truly, Eunice White. I am honored tonight to be speaking with Cinque Brathwaite. He is a North Carolina A&T State University, an Aggie alumni.
Aggie Pride.
Aggie Pride. But in addition to that, he is the son of renowned Pan-Africanist and civil rights activist Elombe Brath. We're here to talk about his legacy. We're here to talk about Cinque being the president of the Elombe Foundation, Elombe Brath Foundation, I'm sorry. And we're here to discuss all things past, present, and future. So I have to say I'm excited. So I'm overly excited, honestly, because I've known this man since we were how old? 18, maybe?
Yes.
So we haven't aged a bit.
17.
And we haven't aged a bit. Aged a bit. And I'm so excited to learn so much about his father's legacy, and the impact that is left on all of us here with respect to Pan-Africanism, with respect to civil rights, and with respect to the future of a global nation. So we're here to talk about all of that. So yeah. Also, before we get started with that, I do want to thank our sponsors. We have the most greatest and gracious sponsors for an interview with. And again, an interview with is a show that I came up with. It allows me to interview talented people from all walks of life and, just shine a light on all that's going on. And in particular, like this particular interview, I get to interview a good friend, an old friend, and to be able to just show respect for the legacy of his dad. I just am so honored to be a part of this. I'm so thankful to you, Cinque, for being a part of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And thank you to your audience for tuning in.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. Absolutely welcome. So we do thank the audience for tuning in. And we also want to thank our sponsors. Tonight's show is sponsored by Untapped Music Radio and Untapped Talent Records. Or Untapped Talent Records. If you're an artist and you're looking for beats, if you're looking for management or representation, or looking to book studio time, please contact the Hatchets. That's Frank, who is also known as DJ Get Loose, and his beautiful wife, Terry Hatchett, at untappedtalentrecords.com. And for your listening pleasure, they also have an internet radio station playing music and talk radio 14 hours a day, every day of the week. You can visit them at untappedmusicradio.airtime.pro every day beginning at 8 a.m. So we're also sponsored by Armstrong International Media, also known as AIM. AIM is a Black woman-owned and curated global premier international network, television network, also specializing in social media and marketing services. So you'll hear more about her a little bit later on in the show. But those two are our wonderful sponsors, and AIM actually is going to be presenting this show and interview with on their network, Armstrong International Media, coming up in the very near future. So you'll get to see this show airing there as well. So I am so grateful to be able to speak to you again about your dad, the late and the great Elombe Brath. If you don't mind starting off with who you are, we already know that you're his son, but you give us a little taste of who you are. Mm-hmm. And then from there, tell us about your dad.
Okay, well, I'm his son. I am Cinque Brathwaite. You might notice a little difference in the last name. He's Brath, I'm Brathwaite. But he changed his name during the 70s, late 60s. He was actually born Cecil Theophilus Brathwaite. He changed his name from Cecil to Elombe. And he shortened Brathwaite to Brath. So that is the difference in the name. And I am the president of the Elombe Brath Foundation. We're based in New York City. I am the middle child. He had 6 boys and 1 girl. And so I'm the middle child, and I am the president of the Elombe Brath Foundation. And I'm a graduate of North Carolina A&T. And I think that's all that really matters about me in terms of me, because this is really about him. So you played the intro of a video from his Senate resolution that was read in Capitol, the Capitol, Albany, New York, where all the Senate and everybody conveys when it was done in on the Capitol floor. That's actual audio. That cartoon is the actual audio from that Senate resolution hearing. I wish you guys could have seen his congressional record that he was put in for his congressional record in the Library of Congress, where he's officially enshrined in the 110th Congress of the United States Congress, his history and his biography. So he's forever going to be a part of American history. But forever. When you ask me, yeah. But so when you ask me, what do I want people to know about him? What was the question again, more specifically?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your dad. A little bit.
Well, where do you want me to start? Where do you want me to start? I can tell you
from where you're comfortable.
Say what now?
So you can begin where you're comfortable.
Oh, okay. I'll start off. I'm comfortable anyway. I'll start off telling you where he worked at, what he did for a living. So basically, He had a few jobs, but for the most of his career, he worked at ABC, American Broadcasting Company. That's Channel 7. He was a graphics artist, a graphic engineer, as well as a consultant and producer to the show, Like It Is. Like It Is was a public affairs programming show hosted by the late great Gil Noble, and when he was at ABC, his whole career was not at working at Like It Is, but his formative years where a lot of work was done in New York City, that's what he was doing. He was working at this public affairs radio show called Like It Is, getting the word out about what was happening, not only in New York City, but all amongst the world, particularly Africa and the Caribbean, whether there was independence movement, liberation movements, human rights abuses, these sort of things that needed a spotlight shined on it. That was his calling. And he had a lot of relationships with former presidents and heads of state. Some of them were not presidents or heads of states at the time. They were in exile. They were fighting for independence, trying to free themselves from the yoke of British colonialism. And because, and he would help, get their message out. He onto ABC and other communications, because in addition to ABC, he also had a radio show for many years on WBAI 90.3 FM, the Pacifica station. It was called Afri Kaleidoscope, where they used to focus on issues of the African diaspora and Africa. Oh, wow. So, he was basically sort of like a communications magnet. And, he was a ferocious writer. He would always be writing, especially for the Black papers, Amsterdam News, Daily Challenge, City Sun. We had all these newspapers here. He was always writing. So as I said, he was working in, his influence could be felt in radio, television, and newspaper. So he was quite the busy activist. But in his main 9-to-5, in which he's known for, it was ABC. He had also done some graphics work early on for another broadcast company, before I was even born. I can't think of the name of it right now. But this was a natural evolution for him. He had come out of an industrial arts school, was known as the School of Visual Arts. Is where he went to as an undergraduate. Not as an undergraduate. Coming up out of high school, it was a special school where the Bruce Hogart. I'm not sure if your listeners know who Bruce Hogart is. Bruce Hogart is the original illustrator of Tarzan, and he was the founder of what is now the New York School of Visual Arts. And my father was the second Black person to integrate that school after the late great contemporary artist Tom Feelings. Everyone who's into the arts, Tom Feelings' name should ring a bell. But Bruce Hogart, even though they had met the quote of Bruce Hogart, the original illustrator of Tarzan, his wife really insisted he has to get in here. And he was a very talented artist, and particularly what he was doing initially was a lot of cartoons with a lot of politics, social political commentary at the time. He was really doing the stuff in satire, like the things that Aaron Magruder in the Boondocks, he was doing that way before Aaron Magruder was ever even thought of. So he was the original sort of satirist guy who took popular culture and turned it on his head. In fact, there's a book out that came out a few months ago. It's called The Artistic Activism of Elombe Brath. It's put out by the University of Mississippi Press, Professor Thomas Aiello. And it goes into his history. It talks all about these works. It talks about his. I'll just read for you real quickly the what is reviewed in here. And if you're in a school in the Deep South, you will be having a study about him very soon, because it's working its way into all the Mississippis and the Alabamas. So the first part. Yeah, the first part is, well, it was for college, but nonetheless, for those who go to college. The first part is Elombe Brath in context. It's 3 units. Part 2 is Brath's early work, and it talks about, his work in jazz, humor, and cartoons. I probably should have read the part 1 in context. It talks about his original Caribbean origins and how it was radicalized through our first cousin, Clennell Wickham, who was the editor of the Herald newspaper, or was it the Guardian in Barbados? Then it talks about the life and work of Elombe Brath, and then it talks about the rhetorical origins of his satire. And he had some really punishing satire of pop culture, Black leadership, and the like. It's just like sometimes you're like, oh, they shouldn't say that. Aaron Magruder would do. My father would do that same sort of thing with popular figures. Then part 2, Brath's early work, downbeat jazz record illustrations. He was doing illustrations for these downbeat jazz records, and then he was also doing cartoons, jokes, and everything from a very popular, the guy that founded the Jazz Institute of Arts here in New York. Rob Reisner, that he did Rob Reisner's illustrations. Anybody into jazz or who know what the Jazz Institute is, their founder worked with my. This is the fifth. This is very early. Then part 3 was comic radicalism. He used to have 2 comic strips that ran in the paper. It was a black newspaper at the time, founded by a former Tuskegee Airman, and he had a strip in there. His strips used to run on the front page of the cartoon. One is Congressman Carter, and the other one was Beatnik Jackson. So the comic strips, if he did Congressman Carter on Monday, on Tuesday you would get Beatnik Jackson. So, and that led to the book called Color Us Colored, which most of this is based on. And Color Us Colored, I won't tell people what it's about, but I would just tell them University of Mississippi, go on to University of Mississippi, Amazon, etc., and get the book. And they can, especially if you're into satire, politics, humor, and you want to see what some of the 60s was going on, you really need to get this book. It was a book that was basically viral in its age that everybody had. And the reason it's even printed now because of there's a judge who worked on the Brown versus Board of Education after Thurgood Marshall. He died a few years ago, and it was in his collection. So it went on sale on eBay in Europe, and it brought up more interest in it. Who's Cecil Elombe Brathwaite? Then people started to realize, this is the same person. This is Elombe Brath, and so boom, voila, they did the book on it. So I said I sort of said a lot in that order, but so basically that's who he was early on, and eventually over time he evolved into what we would call a Pan-Africanist and an African internationalist, which is a more radicalized form of Pan-Africanism. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
I just love the fact that it was like the baton was passed to him by his, older generations, and he just took it and ran with it, and just made such a wonderful impact.
Yeah, well, I mean, he seemed to take a liking to politics very early on because it was something, so on my father's side, my grandparents, immigrants from Barbados, as the cartoon said. Barbados in the Caribbean is the island that's closest to Africa, right? So Barbados is basically is nicknamed Little England. It's a very conservative sort of country by default, So people like my great cousin Clennell Wickham would stand out. Clennell Wickham was advocating for the people who did the work, right, to rise up against the plantation class. In other words, the masters, and the labor and your labor. No, we are the labor. We need to be controlling the production, the money, and this needs to be split evenly. So he would have editorials he was writing in the newspaper and stuff. As the editor, he could pretty much do a lot of what he wanted. And of course, that made the powers that be, that made them mad, and that made, them like, he's dangerous. So there would be talks about his legacy and what happened. This was my grandmother's first cousin. So he got turned on to these sort of topics very early on. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. So we have a couple. We're going to head over to our guests. We have a few viewers who are saying hello to you. So first of all, I want to say and say hello and thank you to Poetess April J. Armstrong. Again, she is the CEO, the curator, the brainchild of Armstrong International Media, and she is what presents this show, and we'll be presenting this show on her network. So thank you so much, April, for tuning in. And let's see, Philip Taylor, another Aggie. What's up, Philip? Phil Taylor has a question for you. Aggie Pride. And Philip asks, how was it open to all? You open to all questions?
How was it growing up? Wow.
Yeah, he said,
I mean, we could answer. I mean, so I could say growing up was pretty normal, not normal. I got very accustomed early on to not being different and being able to stand on my own. So in other words, when you have a father who's very conscious about just about everything, watching TV's not the same, listening to the radio's not the same, everything, he's checking it. You know, I remember one time when I was at A&T, I had come home from, there was not Studio 54, it was another club called The Tunnel. And I was hanging out there. There was a club song, you know, if you listen to club music, I don't remember, but there's a line in it where the guy's like, my life feels so empty, like a puzzle, you're the missing piece. And I was in that, and he heard me say, my life feels so empty. He went, what? Your life feels so, he just went, hey, why? You know, other homes you might be able to get along with singing a tune like that, and it's looked at as innocent, but no, not in my household. You know what I mean? My father was checking everything we watched at the door. He was talking about the politics of it. So,
wow, that is funny. You said words were powerful.
So
words are powerful.
Yes. Yes.
So you didn't get a chance to finish the rest of the song.
That easy. What's that?
I said you didn't get a chance to finish the rest of the song. Got to get you back into
my life. Yeah, I didn't even know, because it was like, look, I had come in at like 4 or 5 in the morning. What happened was I was sleeping. My mom was, it was early. I went and I was laying in their bed. You know what I mean? I wasn't in my room. They were not in there. So I went and I was just laid in their bed. I had the cover over it, and, you know, that song was still in my head because I was out partying, and he went ballistic. You know, I mean, I didn't I could never watch other kids watch Dukes of Hazzard, stuff like that. Nope. You know, he like, you know what that Confederate flag is? You know, everything was an education. Everything was checked at the door. There's so much. I mean, even he was always critiquing pop culture, mass media, everything, you know, all the time. So even if we was watching it, you're going to hear him telling you what the real deal was, or chiming in. So as I said, he was working for a show called Like It Is. So and when it says like it is, they meant like it is. This is what they're saying. This is what it was.
Wow.
You know, and it was the longest running public affairs show in the Black community. I think Tony Brown's show, Tony Brown's Journal, came second.
Oh,
there's another guy Bill McCrary. Yeah, so.
Wow. Yeah. That is so interesting. So I know that your dad is referenced in many books by other Black people. Can you give us a little title, or give us a title of one of the most recent books?
Well, actually, I have one of the most recent books here. There is an excerpt in this book right here. Is called Jonathan Egg. It's by Jonathan Egg. If you ever watched The Daily Show, he used to be on there all the time. It's called Ali, A Life. And in here, Jonathan Egg brings up, you know, the fact that my father and Ali had a beef. You know, they had a beef that, so when Ali first came on the scene, Ali was not really politicized. And a lot of people were supporting Sonny Liston because Ali had not come yet to be that sort of Ali that was talking about the Black community. Initially, Ali was about himself. You know, of course, everybody knows Malcolm really changed Ali around. But so my father at the time wrote an open letter to him. The paper of record at the time for all Black people, no matter where you lived at in the United States, was the Chicago Defender. It had the largest readership, the largest everything. So Ali wasn't Ali then, he was Cassius Clay, and my father was Cecil Brathwaite. So anybody who got the book and you see it in there, that's my father because really what it was is that my father was pioneered a movement called the Black is Beautiful movement. Basically, sort of kicked off in 1962. He was influenced by the Honorable Marcus Garvey and the late great Carlos Cooks, who they would call the Chief. Marcus Garvey coined the term "Black is beautiful." It was first said by John Scott Rock, a lawyer abolitionist, Black lawyer abolitionist, multi-talented thinker in the 1880s. Then it was coined by Marcus Garvey. Then Carlos Cook picked up on those teachings of Marcus Garvey as he headed the African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, which my father was also a member of.
Gotcha.
African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, however, they didn't do a lot of press, and they didn't really want white media, or they only wanted it for our community. So but the problem is you had to get it, they really wouldn't have other press. But my father coming at it, and my uncle and other members of AJAZ were sort of specialists in things at marketing and bringing things to a larger audience. So they had their own group, which my father was the president of. It was called AJAZ. It stands for African Jazz Art Society and Studio. It started off being called Jazz Art Society and Studio in 1956. Then, by 1958, it was called African Jazz Art Society. Then by 1961, when they added the studio, they changed the African Jazz Art Society and Studio, which was really revolutionary at the time, because you didn't have Black people using anything with Africa. Africa was looked at as a wasteland for savagery and all sorts of negative imagery and all sorts of negative anything. So for a group to use that sort of name was very powerful and revolutionary, and it spoke to the fact that this was not a group who was scared to talk about and discuss their roots and their heritage, and they understood who they were.
Right.
So that group, the AJAZ really are the ones who gave us the Black is Beautiful movement. They used a group of models called the Grandassa Models to kick it off in 1962. In fact, January 28th, 1962, they're coming upon the 60-year anniversary of that.
Really?
There are all sorts of exhibits going around the country. Let me just show you an example. These are Grandassa. Okay. All right, so this is New York Magazine, What We Wore. And if you look at, if you get in this magazine, and I got a pink thing here, and you go in here, it's talking about shows that push fashion forward, right? And they list 8 things that made New York the capital. And 1962, Black is Beautiful is the fourth of the 8 things that made New York the fashion capital in the world. And basically, it was the Grandassa Models, were a group of women who wore their hair natural, which was unheard of at the time. You know what I mean? For the most part. And they modeled and did high fashion and made men and other women see themselves differently, and spawned a whole new consciousness for what beauty was, what was style, and what was cool. In fact, they started appearing on album covers everywhere thanks to AJAZ. This is one of them. This is Big John Patton album cover, and this is a Grandassa model on here. This was the work of AJAZ. Then we got the late great Lou. I'm sorry, he's not late great. He's still alive, 96. Lou Donaldson. You see here, this woman on here. That's Helen White. That's my mom.
Let me see her again. Let me see. Show me your mom.
Yes,
so your mother again.
That's her right there.
Oh, beautiful! Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and so that's when we really started seeing artists pushing. Jazz was the music of the time, so everything they were doing was really cool. Everything they were doing was the popular culture at the time. So they were really transforming the minds and the consciousness of people all over. And the archives and memorabilia, they go back to this. They're incredible. Some people, if you ever seen this book here, you mentioned book, there's a book called The Harlem Cultural Political Movements, from Malcolm X to Black is Beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
And it talks about AJAZ, it talks about my father in here, what they did. It's a very not very old book. It came out in 1995, although it deals with the 60s and 70s. These sort of books really capture that era. But I mean, when you mention, I can't really keep up with the amount of books or footnotes or things that my father's involved in. It's just simply too many, and I'm behind in my reading. Oftentimes,
Okay.
people let me know. So, say for example, there's a book out, and I kind of hate to show this book because we're I don't want to say on the air yet, but we have some legal issue with that. This is a book called American Spy by a woman named Lauren Wilkinson, and she references, even though it's supposed to be a fictional book, she references my father. And this book came out. This was a book that came out 2019. Came out right before the pandemic.
Okay.
At New York Times review, Obama talked about it. And this book mentions my father's organization, and although it's a novel, puts it in there. I would have never been aware of this book. Someone had to tell me about this book. Hey, did you see that book that's talking about your father? It's a novel, this, and all of that. But there's some things going on with this that makes me, I'm hesitant to even deal with that right now. But that's a whole different story.
I get it.
But it's really other people. I mean, even like as I said, this book was done by university. Our foundation, the only book we put out is this one here. It's called Elombe Brath, Collected Writings and Essays. It's edited by the great Herb Boyd out of Detroit. And the forward is by Bernard White, the great Bernard White. So, who was the general manager for the radio, one of the most progressive radio stations here in the New York area. So those are just some of his essays. As I mentioned, he was a prolific writer and always writing. Actually, when I talk about him being prolific, and so the forward here, Bernard White writes in his book. He's the former director, program director for WBAI radio station, and he tells a story in here. He says several things that are very important here. Even if people didn't read the book, if they read the forward alone of the book, which is about 5 pages, I think that they would get an understanding, a better understanding of one aspect of my father and his work.
Now you mentioned, I think we talked earlier on the side about the book. You mentioned the quantities are low at the moment, or are you guys going to have more?
This book, right. This book, there are only like 2 more copies available, and people can get it from going to the Elombe Brath Foundation.org website, and they can just go there and they can order it from there, or they could contact you and tell you to save. I think it's $30. They could contact you and you get it to me, and I'll get them over to you. That probably would be faster.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds good. Well, we're going to take a moment and talk to one of our other sponsors. Again, this is AIM, Armstrong International Media. So let's show some love, because she's definitely been showing some love to an interview with some, and I'm so grateful. One moment, please. And in the meantime, if anyone have any questions for or comments for Cinque, Cinque, where he's affectionately known as Cinque, please leave some comments in the leave your comments in the comments. One moment while we go to our sponsor. Hold for just a second. The comment section, yeah. Oh wow, this is a fascinating interview, Cinque. Fascinating. Oh wow. All right, hold on 1 second. Okay.
International Media, or AIM, for the culture for the collective, is the global premier cultural arts network, where we hold all the power. On social media and marketing companies. We also offer services in voiceover, graphic design, commercial development, and podcast production. Start your day speaking out loud and whisper into the evening. Conversations on relationships, protect the one man, one woman teaching. Heal, testimony, and hope. AIM is where you can find affordable packages for you to invest in your brand or your business. Follow, subscribe, like, share, and AIM for the culture, for the collective.
All right. Thank you, Armstrong International Media, so much for all that you're doing for an interview with. You guys, again, be on the lookout in early, maybe the first quarter of 2022, when her station, Armstrong International Media, goes live, television station, and you will see this show airing quite frequently, weekly on her television station. So we're super excited. I'm super excited. So we're going to go over here to the comments. I saw where our brother Philip Taylor asked another question. Hi, Nikkei. Thank you for tuning in. Always support. I'm so grateful for you. Philip Taylor says, when did you realize that he was not just dad? Or did you ever realize that he was not just dad?
I think probably early on, because as I said, I would get friends like, oh, I seen your dad on TV. You know, when TV started to sort of, I guess, become important, you know, yeah, my friends would mention they saw him on TV. So I think that's when I began to understand, when my friends were saying, yeah, I saw your father on TV. Because even though he worked for Like It Is, he also was a consultant for the show, and he'd often be on air himself, you know, or he'd often be on air himself oftentimes, you know, so he didn't just have guests on, that was subject matter expert. Oftentimes he was the subject matter expert on the topic. And so, you know, you got to remember, this is a time in New York growing up, there wasn't all these channels. You didn't have 300, 200 channels. It wasn't all this cable. Yeah, ABC, CBS, and NBC 9, 5, and 11. There's probably like 6 channels, period. So
yeah, probably.
being on TV was like a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
So
well, that was a big deal because it wasn't just. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say that was a big deal because it wasn't like it was just like public access. He was actually on a major network, and I think that's pretty awesome for back then. So yeah, not bad. We have a whole lot of Aggies up here. I want to say hi to my cousin Deacon Chauncey Odom. How you doing, cousin? And great to see Arthur James Rodman. Great to see DJ Bilal. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's see, Rodney Mean Christian. Billy's Finest is up here. Thank you so much for sharing this broadcast as well, because he, you know, when I was posting the ads, he was sharing it to his page, and so I do appreciate that. And Jeff Flood says, "Awesome, my brother and sister, good stuff." And you know, there's a comment that I don't see. It's supposed to be on YouTube, but my sister Stephanie Arnett is on board. So hey, Sister Stephanie. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just don't see it here through the StreamYard, but on YouTube she's there and sharing her love. So I greatly appreciate it. And I'm trying to see if I can see any others. Hold for just a moment. I think that's it. All right, so let's see.
You know, one thing I was going to say, I realized, and I was telling a story about Ali that I never really told what it was about. Really, the beef was what Ali at the time, Cassius Clay, what he often would do, he would say things about the black boxers he was fighting. My father, like, he never calls the white boxers stupid, ugly, or that. And he would say, he would always make marks about their physiognomy or their physical appearance and their looks and everything. And so my father, being the leader of an organization which was pioneering what this called the Black is Beautiful movement, they didn't take too kind to that with Ali. So he dressed Ali down in the Chicago Defender. And you know, you got to read the book in there. The author showed I mean, they eventually made up. In fact, there are a lot of pictures that has since become sort of popular that floated around about, with Ali. My uncle took those photos. The reason that was able to happen is because Ali paid for my father and uncle to go to Zaire to see that fight as part of an olive branch for,
that was nice.
Yeah. But, even he still kept doing a lot of that stuff because, George Foreman never really kind of forgave him for that. He didn't like that you're ugly gorilla and all of those references to as a joke, that he didn't find funny. It's funny because Shannon Sharp, he talked about this same sort of thing on a sports broadcast and said nobody said anything really at that time. And it's amazed because they didn't think it was funny. But yeah, somebody did say something. My father was one of the people who said something about it. It's not often talked about, but if you get that book about Ali in there, it tells the whole story of what happened. So Cassius Clay, he would have been all right had he not been making those overtures. Like, it's one thing to say you're so pretty and this and all of that, but then every time somebody else, black, is you ugly or you're dumb, you're ignorant, that's a conflict they were trying to do in terms of Black is Beautiful. So it caused that sort of thing. And just for the record, if anybody's interested in the history of Black is Beautiful, my uncle has a book out. It's called Kwame Brathwaite, Black is Beautiful. And they have a tour that's been going on around the country in museums. You can see old pictures of my dad, my uncle, my mom. Right now it's in Detroit. It's going to be going to North Carolina in February. Winston-Salem is going to be in a museum there. So it's going around. Some people, if people are interested in finding out about the history of the Black is Beautiful movement, they should probably reach out to I could provide the dates in which that exhibit is going around. It's been in California, San Francisco, South Carolina.
Has it been to DC yet?
Hasn't been in DC. Hasn't been in DC.
Not yet. I'll be looking for
well, I mean, I have nothing. That's really, my father's not a photographer. That's based on a lot of the photography that's done by my uncle, and my cousin. They do that. Even though images about AJazz, in which my father was the president of, those that tour, we don't have anything to do with that. Even though we did loan our paraphernalia and items, memorabilia to that tour, but just in terms of the dates and the schedule, no. Yeah, you will find a number of things in the property of the Elombe Brath Foundation. Yeah,
that would be awesome. I'm sharing their page now, where it is noting that they're in Detroit at the Detroit Institute of Arts. 1960s cultural movement. Black is Beautiful. So this is what I'm looking forward to it. I hope that we can get a chance to see it here in this area, providing we can get through this whole pandemic stuff. I would love to be able to see. Now the picture that I see here, is that your mom?
No, that's my aunt. That's my aunt. That's my uncle's wife. Yes.
Okay. Absolutely beautiful. I love it. So I told you when I was younger, I used to live in Staten Island, and I remember this was during the 70s, and I remember I literally remember the Black is Beautiful movement because that's what was happening. Everyone was wearing their natural. Women, the Black women would look awesome. They dressed to the nines, and the men too. And it was just a great time. It was probably one of the most positive moments I can remember, being, African American or Black. However anybody wanted to identify themselves, that's one of the most, I want to say, positive times. When you see people of color yourselves, and we were beautiful. We're still beautiful. I mean, but there was so much pride in that. So much pride in that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. So, hey, Michelle Crawley, Miss A&T is in the house.
Yeah. Well, it spawned other things. It spawned the style that we see out of the Black Panther Party. In fact, so take, for example, here in New York, when the Black Power exhibit was here at the Schomburg, right? So you see this here, this is AJazz. You see my father right in there. So Eldridge Cleaver ex-wife Kathleen Cleaver was up there, and I was there with a former member of AJazz, and she was like, "Oh, look, a young Elombe," you know.
Okay.
But because the Panthers, when you heard that black, they used to have a song. They were saying "Black is beautiful," all of that. They had been spawned by AJazz. In fact, her husband, Eldridge Cleaver, at the time, had written a letter to my father when he was still in Folsom Prison, saying how he was amazed by one of the Grandassa models, whose name was Jean Gums, and when he got out, he wanted to connect with her. He had never seen Black women in their natural beauty, never thought about it. You know, he's like, this had totally transformed his mind and his whole perspective on things. So, and of course, he was the minister of information for the Black Panther Party. But yeah, the Black Panthers, you know, we know them for those black jackets and that hairstyle, which they was popularized by AJazz, the Black is Beautiful movement, which they picked up on and used. So, you know, because all of this actually is an outbirth of what is known as the Black Arts Movement. Now, the Black Arts Movement, many places you'll see it defined as 1965 to 1970s, but the Black Arts Movement is really much earlier than that. In fact, the group I talked to you about, AJazz, which my father was a co-founder and president of, they spawned the Black Arts Movement. So basically, the Black Arts Movement is like politically cultural motivated artists, dramatists, musicians, writers, actors, etc. You know, would use their craft, would, you know, generate their craft and have their politics and their culture of it. You know, Mary Baraka is one of the most famous personalities coming at it. Sonia Sanchez, people like that.
Nice.
But you know, Mary Baraka or Amina Baraka, his wife, you know, Amina Baraka actually met Mary through my father. She was because AJazz was in Harlem. AJazz was founded though in 1956. AJazz started in the Bronx, and they were doing everything that we talk about that is the Black Arts Movement at the time. You know, so really they are the pioneers of all of that. We're talking about 1965, the Black Arts Movement in New York had already been full-fledged. You know, they had already had several plays. They had already done all of that. You know, if we look at a timeline, the fathers of the Black Arts Movement are AJazz, you know, and its membership and what they did. They had their own plays. In fact, my father wrote plays. He was also a playwright then at that time. And again, all this memorabilia and iconography, you can see it. It wasn't just, you know, it was in a way the Black Arts Movement was our propaganda fighting against white supremacy. They had controlled all the images, all the thoughts, and all the ways we saw ourselves. So we would use arts to convey a different message and different thoughts and different opinions about ourselves and the way we saw ourselves. And it was running in, as I said, my father had comic strips in New York City and things at the time. You know, we got another member who is credited with creating the first African superhero 3 years before the Black Panther. His name was Little Zane. So this group of Afrofuturists and these sort of talented artist people had been doing this first. I mean, before anybody did this group.
Yeah.
Actually, we were waiting, you know, people always talk about, oh, you got a street named after your father, that same area, those four corners over there. He renamed those streets there also, with our former borough president, Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton is the most known owner of the Apollo Theater and the two black radio stations, BLS and WLIB at the time. Again, if you get this book right here, the broadcaster tells you he wasn't going to buy those books. The reason we had black radio in New York, my father talked Percy Sutton into buying those radio stations. He didn't want to do it. He said, you got to have it. So you got to read the forward in this book and learn about what happened at that time. But Percy Sutton was one of the big, he was a very powerful figure at the time, and also, you know, our federal president. the regional streets right there, right across from the Apollo and the Harlem State Office building. Right now it says African Square. It used to be named African Liberation Square. My father told Percy that's what this name's to be, because at that time, South Africa, Namibia, all these Southern Africa, not just in the South, but a lot of these countries didn't have their freedom, and they were trying to get under the cloak of European colonizers and try to get independence. And by renaming those street corners there for the most popular area in Harlem, that it was bringing awareness to it, because Harlem was the center of the Black universe at that time. So it was important.
It seemed like it always have been.
Yeah, at that time. Now it's whatever is happening, but at that time, the whole nation was looking for this sort of direction from.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Harlem Renaissance, and as you're speaking about your father's involvement with so many different, the creation of organizations or being a part of other organizations with the same kind of movement, using, like you said, their arts and creative to be able to address issues of injustice, creating, trying to create, I guess, an avenue to just voice their issues about all of the injustice that was happening at the time. And we had a whole lot. We had the Vietnam War. We had a lot of people coming back from the war, going through a whole lot and not really being taken care of. And I know a lot of Black Panthers were out there really trying to, institute their movements with that as well. But it seemed like your dad really was very instrumental in kind of being a bridge with all these different organizations. So it was almost like a second Renaissance. Do you see another Renaissance happening right now in Harlem? I know we're in the pandemic, but have you seen anything that comes anywhere near to the movements of your father or the folks prior to, during the Harlem Renaissance and all that?
Well, I'll just say it's much different now, because now a lot of times people think activism is on the internet, and they're not really in the streets in that way. If you talk to a lot of the lawyers, people who are in the move, it wasn't about the internet, it wasn't about social media. Now it's different. It's about followers having a platform to talk to people, but it's not really the same sort of organizing. It's not really the same sort of organ. Now it's everything in the digital age is about pointing attention towards somewhere, having your followers on something. So it's different. People are not physically in these places and as much confronting these people. But at the same token, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's different, because there are a lot of people like I'm not doing no more marching or this or that. That ain't what they're about, and I understand that also. So I'm not making a judgment on it. I'm just saying it's different now than it was then. And now, because I just think that the television and media, it changes what people's going direction are. People are looking more for the attention of things than anything else. And it was different back. They wanted,
Yeah. They have digital technology now, but we were the technology back then when we were out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned your dad was a part of a lot of organizations. Let me see here at my questions.
Well, he was he was part of a lot of them, but there was only one that I could. Well, he did. No, that's not true. Here's the funny thing about that, Eunice. I really focus on the four that he co-founded. So he co-founded African Jazz Art Society and Studio in 1956. He co-founded and was president of African Jazz Art Society and Studio 56. Then 19 years later, he came with Patrice Lumumba Coalition, co-founded. And then you have December 12th Movement, which is still viable. Only one of their remaining 6 co-founders is alive, is Viola Plummer. Everybody else has passed on, but they have a new generation under them, etc. And then there is WADU, which stands for World African Diaspora Union, which is more of like an academic historical group. you know.
Okay.
So though the other two, which he co-founded, they still exist. But they're, you know, a lot of those people are also older now, and they're really looking to
Mhm.
try to do some things with their younger blood. But at one time, you know, they were, you know, they're different organizations, but I would just say they were more known to people. And sometimes, even if you've been around for a long time, you got to get that young blood in there to keep that legacy going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got to pass
That's
the baton. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so right now, you know, that's happening. They are doing, those groups are doing that. But the primary two, they basically, they're really associated with my father. When, you know, when he passed, those organizations basically died.
Mhm.
They basically over with, you know, with
Oh,
his
wow.
passing. I mean, Ajaz had something because at 75, my father didn't die until like 2014. And
Mhm.
Ajaz technically went defunct because his time then became devoted to Patrice Lumumba Coalition. So, in other words, he wasn't so much as dealing with things here. He started dealing with things in the diaspora, things
Got
in Africa, the Caribbean, and
Mhm.
leadership, and uh, more of a human rights sort of issues than, you know, that was his larger focus. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I can't count. I myself, because of him, I've met several presidents. I've been that I've met because of him. But he had all of these relationships in Africa and the Caribbean with heads of state, Nigeria, Namibia, South Africa,
Mhm.
Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Nigeria. I mean, just a lot. Angola. I mean, he had the
Wow.
highest reward ever for someone who's not a citizen from Guinea, with Sekou Touré, who basically came to our house when we were kids and shook up the whole neighborhood because at
Oh,
that time,
wow.
this was like a coming to America before coming to America, where a head of a country is coming to your building with a whole entourage, and people had never seen anything like it before, you know. And they like,
Wow.
you know, where is he going? So, I mean, when it came to visiting and knowing all of these people, you know, my father was, again, he had this radio show, and he became known to them as the man to go to get your
Mhm.
message out and to talk with about strategizing, organizing, you know, because he could share what
Mhm.
was done in other places. He was sort of like an encyclopedia for Africa. You know, you name places and times, and he could tell you what happened there. You know, oftentimes he'd be telling people from that country their own history of what happened,
Yeah.
or they would refer to him at events to talk about it. You know, so but he put a lot of time into that, like learning how to pronounce their names correctly, spending time in the
Mhm.
mirror. Like it was for him about respect, and you know, he took a lot of time with that, and it wasn't something that came easy, you know. But so between music and politics, I mean, you know, he's friends with was Miles Davis, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Jazz stars like Owens, you know, all of these people from his earlier jazz time, you know. I remember
Mhm.
Miles Davis calling the house when I'm a young man, and I didn't really, I was in high school, but I didn't know who Miles Davis was. I just remember him calling in that raspy voice and everything, looking for my father. And then, you know, I told my father someone named Miles Davis. He's like, oh man, Miles called. You know, I mean, so he had. Um, I didn't realize a lot of some of these people who they were until I was much older. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like,
That's interesting.
yeah, you know. And he like, oh, he was gonna be with Bob Marley in Jamaica that weekend. Tell your mother this or this or that. He'll call, like, you know, he was often worked up. Let's put it that way. He was often on the go. Sometimes it could be dangerous. I remember he was interviewing, you know, as a journalist
Mhm.
also, you know, he
Mhm.
was interviewing the president of a country that was going through a civil war. And when he's calling
Yeah, I was
on,
wondering about that. I'm like, he's over in Africa,
yeah,
and many of the countries, going through civil wars. So yeah, he was really
so
dedicated
yeah,
and passionate.
yeah, I mean, when it came to these sort of things, he was sort of fearless. And as I said, I mean, Danger for him was a little different, because he was in search of the truth, and he wanted to see, as a Pan-Africanist, you know what I mean? He wanted to see any people of African descent represented properly, So in Pan-Africanism, the belief is we all, the boats might have stopped in different places. Some boats stopped in Jamaica, Guadeloupe, some stopped in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Panama, Barbados, Cuba, etc. But all of them were coming from somewhere in Africa. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
These places
I
have a
agree.
much shorter history, 300 years, 200, whatever the case may be, versus 1,000 years. You know what I mean? So, and we're the most splintered group, whether you be in Brazil, whether you be in Colombia and all these places, you see Black people every in all of these places who are native to those areas, even in Mexico. The deeper you dig, the blacker it gets, and we just basically everywhere. So Pan-Africanism really goes through that sort of concept, it doesn't really make a difference. I mean, even in places where you don't think about Black people, if you go back in the books, in the history books, or you look at what has transpired over there, you will see that those original inhabitants or people, they were probably Black, even if it's not even though it's not in Africa. So, he was a big friend to one of the great scholars, Dr. John Henry Clark. And
we talked about that.
And they would have these things. So, Pan-Africanism, right? It's just the way. So we're not splintered. You know what I mean? Like I'm from Detroit. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm from, you know what I mean? We call that sort of tribalism. We joke with it, but in a lot of times, some people take like where they from a little serious. Like we call it being clannish. They only into their group and all of that sort of thing. Pan-Africanism is sort of like the opposite. We respect the individual cultural things within the group, but we realize that we still all one people, and we should always be unified and pull our resources together to help one another, and not highlight what we have different, but highlight what we have in common.
Yeah, I agree. I'm heading over to the comments really quickly, and I want to thank, I believe it's D Pink. She answered another commenter's question with respect to where to purchase the book. So she offered a link, and then someone else offered a link to Instagram to talk about AJazz, how to follow AJazz online. So
that's a good. Could you do that? Yeah. In fact, I didn't realize the comments. I don't want my connection to get a little messed up.
Oh, that's okay. I'll definitely find a copy. Yeah, I'll definitely will add these links. Let's see here. It was one other thing. Now, Emily Brewster, she wrote vask.tech, and someone else did too. So you're familiar with that?
Say it one more time.
Emily Brewster, she commented vask.tech. So I wasn't for sure what that is. vask.tech.
Yeah, I see that now. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what VASF Tech is. But where Emily, can we get them? So people can get the book, the first book that we took, University of Mississippi Press book. This is easy to get if you just put in the title, The Artistic Activism of Elombe Brath. You can get that on Amazon. You can get it from the University of Mississippi. You can get it anywhere that title comes up readily. Now, the other book, this is by the foundation, Elombe Brath Selected Writings and Essays. You can go to elombebrathfoundation.org. And you can go to the book. You can purchase it through there, or as I said, if you want to go online to AJazz 1950, well, that's what you call AJazz, or the Elombe Brath Foundation. Do you have those? Can you put those in for the audience? I think I sent those to you earlier.
Okay, sure, I can do that. And also I'm
Okay,
sharing
yeah,
this screen at
because
the moment as well. So the Elombe Brath Foundation
that
homepage
foundation.
is up right now. I'm sharing that
Mhm.
right now. And I can
Right. If they click on that book, they can get it.
okay. Okay, guys, you can get that there. And let me see something else. All right. So, do anyone else have any questions for Cinque? I'm trying to check everywhere. I have to always flip back and forth from my screens. So it's really interesting because we was getting ready to head towards this point that your dad was depicted in the highest rated Netflix miniseries, When They See Us.
When they see us. Yeah.
Yes, in your
He was
father's
played
role
by
was,
Omar Dorsey.
and you
Yes.
guys know who. If you don't know who if you don't know who Omar Dorsey is, for those of us who are Queen Sugar fans, woohoo, love Queen Sugar. He plays the role of Hollywood on Owns Network's Queen Sugar, another Ava DuVernay masterpiece. Tell us
Yes.
about how you thought, how did you think about his portrayal of your dad and the conversations you had when he, I'm pretty sure he had to do a lot of research,
Well, they
Um,
did the, yeah, they did their own research. Omar, of course, was not able to meet my dad personally because my dad had already transitioned. But I have
mhm,
had several conversations with Omar about about my father in the portrayal of my father in When They See Us. I Omar was great, except a lot of people felt like Omar is too tall, too big to play my father. They felt like somebody who was my father's shorter stature was part of his personality, and a lot of people
mhm,
felt like they should have gotten somebody shorter. But just in terms of a general looking sort of thing, I think Omar did good. Um,
mhm.
but they're right, of course. That I think Omar, because Omar played in Selma. Oh man, what's his name? I can't think of his play. Somebody who was a big dude, who's 6'4", a big, domineering sort of guy. So for him to play my father, who was like 5'5", you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, some
interesting.
people like right. Some people felt like that wasn't good. But it's still. I mean, I didn't think any. I didn't. I thought it was cool. I'll say that. I thought it was
Mhm,
cool. I thought he did a good job. But the one way you mask that is that the woman who played my mother, she's sort of tall also. Okay, so Adapiro Odoye played my mom in the film. She closed out the film like in
excuse me.
four. The woman who's narrating, that's her voice closing out the miniseries. And she plays Omar's wife or my mother. She's been in a lot of films too. She's Adapiro Odoye. She's like the Falcon sister in the Avengers or whatever. But now she met my mom, and she came and she sat. They actually were in my house and came and sat
Wow.
with my mom and talked and everything. But my parents were key figures in that case, but you don't really see the extent to what their role was in that film. The film really more so uses them as just to help tell a story to an audience in 4 hours. You really, I mean, you could tell you can't really tell all of those connected stories in there. Like
Yeah,
my
you can.
father's whole role, my mother's whole. I mean, my mother founded an organization herself called Mother Love, for the defense of the Century Park Five. And we had relationships like Corey Wise lived on our floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
For many years, we knew that whole family. Youssef lived in the building also, in our same building. Kevin Richardson lived in our same building.
Wow.
Antron and Antoine McCrae and Ray Santana did not live in Schaumburg, you know, and everything. So my parents got to know them after, spent a whole lot of time with them, you know. For example, like you can't see in the film that Corey, that the guy who played the lawyer in there,
Mm-hmm.
Corey didn't have a lawyer. My father got that lawyer to defend Corey pro bono. You know, the
Wow, that
film
was
doesn't show
awesome.
that, but they didn't have. Yeah. My father had a lot of legal connections and lawyers because of his political activism. That's why he could have all those sons in Harlem and nobody go to jail because if something happened, it was always a lawyer. It was always the best lawyers pro bono. And for a lot of black men in Harlem, that's really what gets them jammed up. They didn't have proper
Yeah.
legal representation to represent them. And my father worked in the prison systems also, speaking to prisoners, all of that, visiting
Mm.
prisoners. You know, outside of the Central Park case, the biggest case in New York was a guy named Larry Davis who shot several police officers and beat the case. It was the first time in
Mhm.
American jurisprudence that a black man had ever used self-defense and got off with shooting
Got off.
police officers. Yeah, and you know we've seen the story of this through like Hoodlum and a few things, and they don't actually use Larry Davis's name. There's a video out about it. It was done by some Reed. I can't think of his name, but you see my father. All that whole DVD came from my father's court notes. You know, I knew Larry Davis because of my father. You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, you know, if you get this book, Bernard says that when it came to the politics and things happening in New York, whether in the back rooms or whatever, there wasn't a case that dealt with black people that basically in politics, you know, or cultural that my father said wasn't involved in, you know. But that was his passion. That's really what he loved to do.
Mm.
But you know, at the same time, it's what wore him down. It's what caused him to have a stroke, because in
Oh
many
wow.
places that he visited, in many countries, he never really had a vacation. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
He every time
Mhm.
he would go somewhere, he'd have a ton of things he was reading. Like I've been on trips with him. He didn't. Whether we were in England for something, we were in Zimbabwe for something. It was, you know how most people want to have some. Let's do this. His he has his foot to the ground all the time with these things.
Wow.
And me, I know how to relax and chill and take it. Let me see the country. Let's go do those sort of things. He's a
He was
different
about
person.
business.
Yeah. He was about his business, and you know his sort of thing was, you know, we don't have no time to do that right now, you know. But you know, eventually, just like when they see us, to my knowledge and from what I know, there's a movie coming out about Larry Davis soon. I had went
Oh good.
to mock premiere at a film festival invited by the family. So I know
Mhm.
that deal. I don't believe it's gonna sign, but in the future, I know that that's something that will be coming up. Actually,
Mhm.
there is a documentary that's about to be released about A-Jazz and the Grandassa Models. My father
Oh
created the
wow.
Grandassa Models in 1961, and A-Jazz put them out with these things called the Naturally shows. Um,
Mhm.
and there's a documentary put out coming out by our organization Cultural Caravan Studios. That's going to be out
Okay.
within the next few months, and it talks about these members. My father, my uncle, Frank Adu, um, Chris Hall, uh, Bob Gums, Ernest Baxter, some of these people, and a lot of these guys were like giants themselves also. But that's coming out soon, that documentary, and there are also
That's awesome.
a lot of other ones that are coming out, you know. But I don't know the dates off the top of my head, and you know,
Okay,
like
let's just
recently. Oh, sorry, I
I'm
was
saying
saying
I just oh you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was saying like so recently the Smithsonian African American Museum in DC, they featured on a website, the anniversary of the Black is Beautiful movement, January 28th, 1962. So
Wow.
so they had a picture on there, my uncle took all of those pictures that you see there. And you could see my father in the center, the Grandassa Models, some members of the organization. But them being honored, and actually that organization was supposed to. There was a street name, and it was supposed to be happening in regard to them in May. So we're still trying to find out what's going on with that. For the original founding in the Bronx over on Kelly Street was supposed to be recognized. So, well, stay tuned for that. And as I said, there's another book. I don't want to put the author on blast who's doing a book about that whole evolution of my father from what we talked about early to later, and how he knew all these people, how all these people knew him, and he connects how all of this happened because of my father's relationships in television and radio and his political integrity. Because it was not just radio, but it was just that he couldn't be brought. He had a lot of opportunities to do things just for money or this or that, but he was a highly principled person, and you couldn't buy him, and you couldn't. If he disagreed, even if let's put it this way. One of his best friends, I showed you that artist who put my mother on the cover. Lou Donaldson is in Music Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? My father boycotted him, and that was his buddy, because Lou Donaldson played South Africa. He had went to during Sun City apartheid. My father was like, "Yeah, you this and all that, but if you do that," so when Lou Donaldson had to come back and do a free concert, and the proceeds went to anti-apartheid movement.
Wow.
So. And they had a show in South Africa. A lot of people thought my father, cousin, they thought he might be South Africa. He used to be on TV there so much,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, I mean, even I've seen some clips from, their TV shows out there, and they would have interviews with him. It's amazing the things that you can still sort of catch that we were not in the digital age yet, but it's just in old mediums, and you can do it. That's how come I'm a board member of an organization called UPAMA. And one of our goals, what we do is we take old videos and old videos, VHS and stuff of things that are critical, historical. They were on VHS, Betamax, and old things, and we are digitizing them so that history is not lost to younger students, younger kids. Yeah, we're in the process of, just like we do, digitizing them. So sometimes people feel like, oh, this is new. A lot of this stuff that's happening is not new. Some of our generation just don't know about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. Even for me, I mean, I see how Rodney Mean Christian said, "Wow, I didn't know this." Like, congrats. Like, I feel the same way, Rodney. I'm like, how did I go to college with you and didn't know all of this stuff about you and who you were related to and the impact he was making on our history? I was like, that is just amazing to me.
Well,
amazing.
I mean, in all fairness, there were also certain things that at that time going through that metamorphosis, you might not really want to say, because in 1970, I don't know if people know who Larry Mcdonald was. He died in a plane crash. He was a Democrat from Georgia. He was a congressman. He entered into, there's a cartoon, Eunice, you saw it, Larry Mcdonald. He is basically the founder of what we now know as the Deep State. And in 1975, he wrote an open letter in the New York Times calling for the arrest of my father and for Irvin Davis for raising money for groups in South Africa, in Southern Africa, not just basically in the southwestern countries, who all of that was apartheid. That's not just South Africa. It was also Namibia. It was also Zimbabwe. All of them were under white minority rule. And one of the ways to help that was if they had money, they could, of course, get ammunition. They could get these things, well, the Cubans were giving them these things anyway, but it's always nice to have money. So when you're raising money for quote unquote, you're raising money. He said they were raising money for armed struggle. Technically, they were right, But as you know, from your own former president, Reagan, Cheney, they saw Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. They didn't care about black apartheid and human rights. None of these people at that time did. So they wanted my father arrested for raising this money, him and Irvin Davis.
Wow.
And what happened was Larry McDonald died in that. The Russians shot him down. He was in that Korean jet in the 80s. But before that, what he was doing, because he didn't get it to come, that's how the surveillance system sort of started. He was the first one, who started the spying, on American citizens, So luckily for my family, Larry McDonald died in that plane crash, because who knows, who knows what he might, he had been, and he wasn't even a Republican. He was a Democrat from Georgia. He was a congressman.
Wow.
But we still have the open ed that it's probably available. You see in that cartoon that was shared with you where, he like, no, we want them arrested. And why you want him arrested? For his longing to see, as a Pan-Africanist, his longing to see the Black people free in their own country from from white supremacy and European colonizers. And our white politicians here, like, no, everything was fine over there. Leave it alone. Like, you can't, Of course, we lucky these places have their independence today, for the most part. But it was sacrifice. It was sacrifice. It was people jailed, and it was surveillance, and they were always looking to catch you up on something. I'll just say that. So knowing that as a kid, I would never really want to, highlight these sort of things, like, technically, because I knew there was an element of danger. I mean, as a kid, in those times, we didn't have even before the phone bill would be thousands of dollars for all of these calls coming in. Wow. And one time the phone got turned off. CIA called phone company, said, turn that damn phone back on. We need to hear what's going on. I mean? God. Yeah. So my father, but it's sort of like an epiphany where they turn off your phone for non-payment. You know what I mean? Okay. Because even then, you might not remember this, but even a local call to North Carolina was long distance. You paid long distance fees. Like now, a cell phone, you call anywhere in the United States, it's just a call. But back then, you paid long distance. You had international call and all of that. It got to be quite expensive having these sort of exchanges and this sort of networking. So that bill came in. Yeah. So that's the way they're listening in. Yeah, they're listening in. And if you read, as I said, any of the books or the things, it's obvious what was happening. In fact, I'll tell you this, and this will be probably the last thing I say. With this book here, University of Mississippi has done features on several Black political figures, civil rights leaders, etc. For this book, they tried to get under Freedom of Information requests, for the Freedom of Information Act, the files on my father. The government would not give them to them. They said that's the first time they've ever been denied anybody.
Interesting.
So, I'll just leave it at that and say that that's interesting, because that the sort of internationalist work that he would later do was something that they pay a lot of attention to. They pay a lot of attention to. So, and as I said,
it's been that way for years.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, if your dad was alive today, what do you think his message would be to us and the continuance of the movement? He had to pass that baton on to someone. What would be his message to us today?
Well, I'm not sure, because I just think it's hard to get into, some of these changes in technology, unpredictable. I think it's hard to get into that sort of thinking because I believe that my dad got softer as he got older. He was hardcore, you know, when he was younger, hardcore, like, but he softened as he got older. He's soft. Certain people who I would have thought he was be more critical of. He like, yeah, but he sort of was softening as he got older. But I mean, as I said, if anybody, well, the original Color Us Colored, in which a lot of that book is based on, is under it's in their classics in the library. You can get it. Professors and people like that. It's the sort of book you can't take it out. Let's put it that way. When you go to a library that has it, it has to be under lock and key. That you have to look at it and go through it in that room. So that book, Color Us Colored, at that time, it was a very controversial book. It's the reason that Malcolm X wanted to meet him, and wanted to, because it's one of the reasons he respected Malcolm X, because actually he had a cartoon of Malcolm X eating a pork chop in there, So when he came to meet, Malcolm was like, "Oh, is that Brother Brath who did that cartoon on me?" That sort of thing. He said Malcolm had a great humor, And in the essay book, he tells the story, the reason how, if you read Betty Shabazz's book, you see that Betty Shabazz met Winnie Mandela through my father. Betty Shabazz tells in her book, you know what I mean? And not only that, Betty always would be telling my father other stories about Malcolm. There's also when my father and Malcolm X went to first hit James Baldwin is a controversial story that comes up often a lot of times. There's a lot of things that happened, way before I was even ever born that, I learned about, through the stuff. I mean, let's just put it this way. I'm already, in regard to that question, I can't answer that because I'm still learning certain things. I got a call today from a young brother from Temple University, the Black Studies Department, and he sent me a 1970 clip, newspaper clipping he came upon, where my father and three other people on a television set of Like It Is with Gil Noble, and the newspaper clipping was what was happening, in 1970, in March of 1970, and it was dealing with some stuff with Nigeria. And what's wild is, so I mean, it helps me to, when I see stuff like that, to put it in time with other things, but it's really hard. It's really hard to say, because I think that with all of this, the way we have media now, I think he just would be, for one, he would have been, I think he was getting a little worn down, to be, you know what I mean? Just like, okay, sort of like
to be
stuff that he wouldn't have known before. Yeah, he like, all right, he didn't really, I ain't gonna say he didn't really started to care, but before he let nothing slide. And as he got older, he let things slide and he looked past them.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, but, and also in that, but although I make the phone call reference and say I was aware that the powers that be always were watching him, and he was a firecracker. At the same time, those political, I mean, not to put one of my siblings brothers out on the street, but I'm not going to tell that story. But I'll just say this: we always had, if anything happened, we always had the best political attorneys. That you see the Crumps and these sort of people now who they are, for these cases. We had people who commanded that sort of attention but without that sort of the spectacle, so to say. They wasn't looking for these cases, but they were serious lawyers and did a lot of work, especially when it came to people who were jailed or something that was of a political nature. So,
Right.
I never, in all transparency, he never needed a lawyer for me.
Oh, I'm sure you're such a good person. You
Such a
stayed
good
out of
person.
trouble.
That's
You're
right.
still a good person. Still a good person. But this has been a very interesting conversation. I want to thank you again for just coming through and sharing with us so much about your dad. I mean, I'm just like amazed. I'm sitting here still like amazed because I'm like, I cannot believe that I love history. I especially love Black history, and I just love learning about what we've done, what we're going through, and where we're heading, what we're doing to try to continue our independence or trying to maintain independence and justice for us. So to meet someone who, like we stated earlier, just sacrificed so much of himself. Not only for the community here in the States, but also across the waters over in Africa and down in the Caribbean. I mean, that's absolutely interesting. And yes, Rodney, thank you for the history lesson. Like seriously, excuse me, this was big time history lesson. Big time. So anything else you want us to know before we close out? Because I would love to close out. There's a video that Cinque shared with me, and it has to do with a tribute that, to his father that someone made. So we'll play that on our way out. But anything else you want to share with us?
No, I just would say that if people want to learn more, it'd be they could go to the Elombe Brath Foundation.org. I mean, the website needs a makeover. It's a start, but it's not. I mean, it's just a start, like in terms of things. But they're gonna be seeing a lot more because a lot of what in his first world, in his first life, although it was political, um, it was political and cultural. Through pop culture, him as an artist, as a playwright, you know what I mean, as a poet, as a writer, as a visionary in a Black arts theater, spawning the Black arts movement years later, being the pioneer of the organization that started that. The way using satire, the way using his columns in the newspapers, etc., to also push these things forth, and it didn't stop. That picture you showing there, that's the architect of the African burial ground. He and some others, when they found out that they were going to the ancestors, they like, y'all not gonna dig up on this area.
Okay.
They stopped the multi-million-dollar project. Like, we got this is not just
That is awesome.
In the area of New York. I mean, he's just someone who, whether it's here in New York City or whether it's somewhere else, he was a man of high integrity, and he really didn't pull any punches when he felt like we were not getting our due and that we deserved better or more. So and it goes from the organizations, the 4 organizations that he co-founded, the organizations that he was a part of, that he worked with, even the National Black Political Assembly were out in Indiana. It was for journalists. He was a part of a number of organization, but I think the ones which not only he co-founded, but he was the lifetime president of, those are the ones which I think we can still, if we look into what those organizations represented, we can still understand him best. But I don't think all of that would have been possible without him having a radio show that was known internationally through these people. If they come into the States or whatever they wanted to go to, or being part of like it is on ABC, where it was a Black Public Affairs show where he could help bring guests in and get these people that our community need to hear, and we could start networking, talking about it, and having things written up in these other outlets. I mean, like, because I mean, before this, we would never have a president like Sekou Touré coming to a radio station. You know, we're not gonna have the first president at that time, Sam Nujoma of Namibia, coming through, or any of these things. You know, he the right person at the right time, and because of his background as an artist and as a marketing artist through that school in his early education, he was able to use his skill set and his artistic mind to design flyers that were captured his unique writing style to market to who normally wouldn't be interested, and bring them into political forums and shows and topics that drew their interest and began to politicize ordinary everyday people and influence them. So I think that we can't look at the organizations he's founded without understanding the work that he did for living in those things. When you bring those things together, and of course, none of this is possible without my mother's support. And mother was a whole person. My mother was quite a brilliant woman herself. And, you know, contrary to what people think, my mother did not really get her politics from my father at all. My mother had a mentor who her ex-husband, who was much older, owned one of the oldest libraries in New York. His name was Charles Seaford. Ironically, he was also from Barbados. Although this woman, her mentor, was not, but Charles Seaford was also from Barbados. And so his younger wife inherited that library full of old books, Count Voney and all of these early writers who, Dr. Clark and some of the other early Black historians who sort of gave us that feel good about our history and legacy. You know, so she had this woman. Yeah. Her name was Ty Seifert, you know, and she was like a second mother to my mother, very educated, politicized woman who really was my mom's mentor. Because basically what happened, my mother came to what A-Jazz was doing. My father was actually born in Brooklyn, grew up in the Bronx. Then after that, it was Harlem, Manhattan. My mother was born in Harlem, but her family was from the South. But my mother's side moved to New York from the South in 1925. My grandparents came to the United States from Barbados also in 1925. So, but my grandfather had two businesses in Harlem, two dry cleaners. He was a tailor and he taught my father and my uncle and both of my uncles art, you know. So but he was a businessman, you know, he was a businessman. So he was a businessman, but he made his money in Harlem. So everybody knew my grandfather. I don't want to go into him, but everybody knew he was a very popular little fella. You know, everybody knew him because you know dressing was a big thing, and people
the big time
that on the jazz circuit. You know, before he started, he was a very, very sharp dresser. These guys were dressed to the nine. Again, if anybody goes to see that exhibit that's been in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Texas, Austin, Texas, South Carolina. It's right now in Detroit and all these places. And you see in the museum, when you see the pictures of my father his friends and all of them, you'll see some sharp dresses. You see them with Cannonball Adderley and all of these guys, because initially what they were just trying to do was save jazz as a black art form, you know.
Yeah.
So so that was something that they felt needed to happen, because, well, you got to get that book to learn more about what was happening with jazz at the time.
Wow, and that's the book that's on your foundation's website. Is that right?
Nope, not that one. That's this one. This one is dealing with my father early prior to 1975, and this is things that he had himself written in 1975 to like 1990s. So they're different things. But I think the next book that I can't say which professor is doing it, but I think that's going to really be taking everything that's in both of those books, combining them. In our foundation, we have some things we might be in some traveling exhibits across the country ourselves when this pandemic is over. You know, we got some other things we're working on, as well as some features that we're going to be on. So
and I'll make sure to put
cat out the bag yet.
Oh, okay. So I'll make sure that we're
working on something.
Okay.
Say that last one again.
I said I'll be sure to put the links to where we can find those books on the in the comments, so everyone can. So this is going to be a rebroadcast, by the way, guys. It's going to replay on my YouTube page. On my YouTube page, let me find that link. If you don't have it already, let's see, where are we? This is my YouTube link. So I'll be sure to note all of the links to pieces of conversation that we've had tonight and all that we've learned, both on the Facebook side, on the YouTube side, and then this broadcast at some point in time will air on Untapped Music Radio station in the near future, maybe tomorrow, if not, but definitely in the near future. So so I want to definitely say thank you for coming through. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We usually don't go this far over. We try to kind of keep it to an hour, but some days you just can't keep to an hour. It's just too juicy. And I'm not.
I didn't even realize we had went that much over.
Oh, it's okay. It's fine. I mean, I absolutely enjoyed our conversation. Again, just like some of our viewers have already stated, this was like a big time history lesson. People our age are just learning about the works of your father. And then there's scholars out there who already know so much. It's just like to meet, one of his, his kids, and to actually hear about his life through his children's mouth, eyes. I think that's just absolutely wonderful. So this is like a big, precious piece of information and history. So I'm glad to be a part of it. Definitely glad to be a part of it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, as a matter of fact, I want to share who we're going to have on next week. Excuse me. So next week on an interview I'm going to be interviewing, let's see, where is she? All right. Okay. I'm trying to find some information. Let's see, it's not there. Give me one moment. There we go. And can't see. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'm trying to find my screen. Give me one moment. So, Cinque, while I'm trying to find this information here, what's the future of the foundation?
Well, I say the future of the foundation is that we have a number of projects that are coming up. As I mentioned, hopefully something similar to this, not just photography based, but appreciation of his early days as an artist. So as I said, this Black is Beautiful exhibit, there's been going across the country. It's you know, him, my uncle, and their cohorts. It's focusing on, you know, Black is Beautiful movement, them as Black arts pioneers, that sort of thing. But this,
Okay.
what we hope to have coming in some museums and getting picked up soon, is more so dealing with him as an artist and the organization as the artist. And also, you know, the reason our foundation was able to get started was because my mother had not been an artist, but she has about 15 amazing paintings she did prior to her stroke that were auctioned and sold. And, you know, paintings, you know, for her to not be known, she has paintings they selling for $5,000. So she
Oh
was
my
the one who
God.
basically, her paintings made the foundation possible, you know.
Mhm. Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I mean, if you can see in the background, there's that painting right there that's on the wall. It's of a little girl. My mother
Oh,
painted, you
beautiful.
know. Yeah,
And she painted it?
that's right. You know, yeah, she painted that, and she had never painted before. She's not like my father, where my father is a trained artist. Went to a
Wow.
visual art school. My father did regular art as well as commercial art. You know what I mean?
Wow.
He'd been an artist his whole life. My mother just one day she said God told her to start painting, and she
Oh,
started
nice.
painting. And she has some fantastic works that have been. We've been very fortunate that people who like Black art have
Hmm.
supported her stuff. You know, every almost every piece of art in my house is done by a family member, except for one, which is a
Okay.
model that in the back. She's the only one, the only piece of art that's in the
Oh,
house.
wow.
You know, my mother has limited edition prints for her art because most of her originals have sold for thousands of dollars. The only way another person can get them now is to buy a limited edition print through them,
Oh,
which
wow.
which range from $550 to some 800. But with it being limited edition, there might be only 10 others in the world outside of the original because they're limited
Oh,
edition.
wow.
So her art has been the catalyst for us to be able to continue the legacy and the vision that my father set down, as well as some of the countries that he worked with, those
Hmm.
nations wanting to have relation, you know, do things with the foundation and those sort of things. But it's really because of my mother that her art that we were able to finance ourselves to do
That's
that, you
awesome.
know, and the fact that people love even love her prints of her art, you know,
Oh, wow.
it's all around my place. If you could just see all around it, her art is all around.
Oh, wow.
So
Well, that's amazing.
like I said, she just one day overnight, that's what she started doing. You know, I had a
And
shirt
can,
that which showed her this current shirt that I have right now. It only shows
mhm.
the street named after my father, as well as the street next to it, showing how my father named those streets. But you know, but actually, in addition to the main thoroughfare in Harlem, centered around my father and him naming the other, there are, as I said, his first organization that he co-founded and led. They were supposed to have already been a no. We were looking to have confirmed that the street naming in the Bronx also. So that's something that was sort of tackled by the foundation. You know that these street markings and land is when people look up, like who was that? When they start to look it up, they'll get some history. They'll learn some things.
Okay.
You know,
Well, that's
that's what we
awesome.
hope.
Well, everybody definitely head to the foundation, the Elombe Brath
And people
Foundation,
and
for
people can
more
always donate
information.
to the foundation, Eunice. if they go to the foundation, they can always hit that donate button. They could always donate to help us on our mission statement.
All right. Well, I'm pretty sure you will definitely get plenty of donations. It's a fascinating history of a fascinating man. And we're grateful to be able to have learned so much about him and his mission. And I think with that being said, I absolutely enjoyed this interview. Excuse me. And I'm hoping that as you guys continue to grow, that you can come back and we can talk about, all the wonderful developments that's happening. And I would love to, in the future, learn more about his plays. So that would be something we could talk about on the side, how I can get access or read his pieces. That would be so nice. And of course, to promote your mom's work, your mother's artwork. I think that's awesome. And how instrumental it's been in supporting the foundation. We do have next week, I had to go back and pull up some information, but Miss Andre Harris, she's an actress, she's an entrepreneur, she's an award-winning playwright, also screenwriter, and a film artist, and she's also an evangelist. Feel my voice kind of trying to go now. She's going to be speaking with us about next week about her career, her past, present, and future. If you guys can come on back next week, 8:00, right here live on Facebook and right here live on YouTube. It would be such a wonderful honor to have you guys come back and hang out with me so we can get to know this woman and all of the wonderful things that she's been blessed to be able to do. So that's Andre Harris on next week. Again, award-winning actress, entrepreneur, filmmaker, screenwriter, and an evangelist. So I can't wait to meet her and talk about all the great things that she's doing. And I want to say thank you so much again, Cinque. I call you Cinque. Thank you so much for spending time with us and talking about your wonderful dad and all the work that your family, have done in terms of civil rights, in terms of Pan-Africanism, in terms of just defending us as a people. I'm just so amazed. I'm just truly amazed. And I just really can't wait to see how you guys continue to grow. I'm excited about that. Truly excited about seeing you guys just continue to grow and share this man's legacy, your family coming together and everybody just doing all the wonderful things to, continue to promote his cause. I'm excited for you guys and so happy to know you. And I'm just still like amazed. Like, how did I not know any of this stuff about Cinque after all these years? It's like, what? But you got to come back. You got to come back. When you guys, you spoke about a couple of things you couldn't really talk about tonight in terms of, what's the future. You got to come back and share with us, what's happening, because I definitely want to be able to have you on and just, continue shining a light on all things Elombe Brath Foundation and family members. So, yeah. Before we close.
Luckily, we got the pandemic ending, so I hope to be able to
talk about it. Oh, my gosh.
Optimistically, I believe
very optimistic.
2020, 2023, everything will be back on track, regular.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, because I think if we compare today's time to the last major pandemic, I think it took them about maybe 3 years to get through all that stuff. Possibly, give or take a couple whatevers. So let's see here. I want to play this video. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And again, I know that we ran a little over, but I hope you found this interview to be very fascinating. And according to the comments, everybody was fascinated. So I'm thanking you guys for hanging out with us tonight. And again, definitely come back next week at 8, please. And we'll meet Miss Andre Harris and find out all wonderful things about her and with respect to her entertainment and her role as an evangelist, her career as an evangelist. So I'm looking forward to meeting with her on next week. And I just thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors, Untapped Music Radio and Untapped Talent Records, and April J. Armstrong, who is the brainchild of AIM, which stands for Armstrong International Media. She actually is presenting this program on her upcoming television network. You get to see all things interviews, music, independent artists, poetry, anything and all things cultural arts. I can't wait to be involved with that opportunity coming up in a couple of months, I believe. So stay tuned for all that fun stuff. This show will be airing a couple times during the week, so it'll be great. And we're going to close out with a tribute to Elombe Brath, and it's a beautiful tribute. So please watch it from beginning to end. And then Cinque afterwards. Let's hang out for a few more minutes after this. We close out our broadcast. And so let me try to put this. I'm sharing the screen again, and I thought I had this already queued up. So sorry, but this is awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in, and you guys have a wonderful week. See you next week.
Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's what Randy say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's what Randy say. First off, defund all the presets. Doing more harm than good now. We red gems to you sequence. To accept them the sequence that have minds and then they bring the squad. The predator is black, still flying on the lines. We combine rhymes, alleviate, terrorize minds. Easy break. In my time, I know G's and I know the clowns. Places with the times to it. Efforts like bring no revolution. This is facts. That revelation keep me moving. Only failure in one way. I gotta do you believe. I do the shallow waves like I go in the breeze. Pay them dues of everybody. Control, then get it. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. This is me. This is us. Before I tear the building down, I'm here to live what? Living just not what this is. She won't walk behind the lines. Stuck hard, get it. She raised the flow. My unsung queen. I see you on your throne. Do crazy. Yeah. You just my life, you live the best mentality. Investing in yourself, I share you stop, bro. Why you never like this? We've been in niggas, they're in the niggas, they leaving white rice. Fuck out my whole pieces, they break when you put in diapers. On the market for the fire, they hit a lick with some rifles. They be praying that the shots don't stop, clutching the Bible. I'm praying that the defect and move away from these idols. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say. Same old song. Let that melody play. Things go wrong. That's Randy would say.
All right. Let's see, where are we? Thank you again. That was a great tribute. We'll see you guys next week. Please join us again for the next upcoming interview with Andre Harris. Looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care, and thank you again for tuning in.